What's up, UXers? I am loving this conversation with Philippe and I. This is a follow-up conversation. He was on the podcast last year talking about bringing OOUX to renfrewshire.council.gov. And this is a year later, us following up. How did the launch go? How is it going with really integrating OOUX in a big way within government? Such a cool conversation, but I just want to warn you, my audio sounds like I recorded it with a potato. I guess I did record it with a potato. No idea. Smart defaults didn't work for me. So my audio sucks. So please be forgiving with that. Hopefully it's not too painful to listen to and you can really get to all the wisdom of the content in this episode. So forgive me for bad audio on this one. If you're looking to level up your UX, content, or product design practice to confidently and joyfully tackle complexity, ask the million-dollar questions, and design digital systems that actually work, you are so in the right place. Welcome to the UX Level Up podcast. I'm Sophia Prater, and for over a decade, I've been teaching professionals how to make the most valuable and often invisible parts of UX gloriously visible. We will untangle the structure beneath the surface before jumping into screens, saving time, money, and headaches, and having so much fun doing it. Together, let's UX collaboration, break down silos, and build shared understanding that sets everyone up for success. Let's become the systems thinkers that our teams, and quite honestly, the world, are so desperately craving. Let's level up our practice and redefine what it means to be a UX designer. Let's jump into it. Philippe Fara, welcome back to the UX Level Up podcast.
Thank you, Sophia, for having me back. Really exciting.
Yeah, we've rebranded since you were here. You came on I think it was about a year ago with Kate Redfern, and that was when we were the OOUX podcast. It's still basically the OOUX podcast, but we have rebranded to the UX Level Up because that's so much about. That's what OOUX is about, is leveling up our careers, our practice, basically the industry as a whole, the world, and then the beautiful ripple effect. So thanks for coming back. And last time you were on, that was like one of my favorite episodes. It was so cool having you and Kate. I actually just resurfaced it recently in our newsletter because I was like, people just need to hear this because y'all actually had really great statistics on showing that OOUX was actually working. And that was just a really neat story of you and Kate on the consulting side and you internal at Renfrewshire Council leading the digital experience there as digital experience manager. And then y'all were seeing all these successes. And then you came and you joined us in cohort 10 and you're coming back to cohort 11 as an advanced strategist and a mentor, which is so exciting. Just since last time, I kind of did a quick catch up, but like what else has been going on? What's been going on with the project? Can you catch us up a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely. So it's been extremely busy over the past 12 months. So as you said, the certification was very intense, but so enjoyable. And I learned so much there. And that was super helpful to do the certification just before we started the work of the development for renfrewshire.gov.uk. So it gave me trust the process, trust certain techniques that are within the process and apply them as much as possible. And maybe perhaps apply a few other techniques that we have within my team and see where that would lead us. And that led us to the development of renfrewshire.gov.uk. We launched a partial version of it or first version of it in July this year. And since then, we've had really good feedback. It's not a perfect product. There are still many, many more objects to scope, identify, develop, and implement. But we've done the foundations, and that's a really good thing.
Amazing. So just to kind of recap the timeline, you did our self-paced masterclass and Kate did as well, right? So y'all both in the self-paced masterclass got a lot out of that and then did a bunch of design work and testing and experimentation. We talked a lot about on that last podcast episode, which we will link down below. So if y'all want to go back and listen to that, like go back in time a year ago, right before the certification. But another part that I just loved about that episode was you talking about how you were bringing in all these other methodologies, like how might we statements and deep content strategy work, because it is a very content heavy site. And it kind of all like linked in to OOUX really nicely. Like it wasn't like, oh, like we're stepping on each other's toes here with all these methodologies. They did fit together really nicely. So then you did the certification and you say, okay, that was like really good to have that into the development of what we had kind of designed and worked on over the spring and the summer. So I want to talk more about that. I've got a little pin in that. I'm going to bring you back to that, but I want to go back to, and then you said about the certification, which is like, it was intense, but it was so worth it. So that's a 10-week course. And like, I think a lot of people are like, I don't have time for this. I'm already feeling like really burnt out with work. I'm really frustrated at work. Like everything is so hard. Why would I go and like add this to my plate? So somebody that is feeling like that, what might you say to them about like getting this kind of training?
It depends on what your personal priorities are, combined with your professional objectives. And for me, it was just the right time to grow with my expertise and make sure that this expertise is actually aligned with the objectives of the organization that I currently work for. And the timing was absolutely perfect because this is definitely a journey. And after you do the course, it's definitely not the end of it. And I think the fact that I'm now going to be an advanced or within the advanced program shows that actually this training is definitely not the end.
It definitely is a journey. I was like, you were saying how intense it is. And like, I was thinking about it the other day, like it feels like you're learning to like think about things differently. It is like you're rewiring your brain in many ways. And I kind of see like, you know, those superhero montages where the superhero is like not yet a superhero, but they're like, they've been captured by the mad scientist or something. And they're like put into some sort of, they're like strapped down. And, you know, like with Wolverine, it's like, you know, he's like screaming and everything, but then he's a superhero afterward. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's fun. It's a lot of hard work, but it's like, yes, there's growing pains, but like when you have growing pains, you have growth. And yeah, sometimes it's like it feels uncomfortable, right, when you're going through the process, but then on the other side, I think it's so worth it.
Absolutely. And it's contagious. So when you start, you can't really stop. As you said, like now you can't unsee the things that you now see. And yeah, it's kind of becoming addictive. So in every product or in even like when you go to physical places, you're going to see these objects and you're going to understand, or I'd sort of reflect on this and think, oh, how could they have done that better, perhaps with a better structure of their shapes or whatever. So it's really fascinating to see how this sort of mindset is not just being applied in my day-to-day work, but also in my day-to-day life, I would say.
Totally. So, it's problem solving. It's just problem solving. And you can use it to like create amazing systems, but like you can use it to plan a party. You can use it to understand something that's happening on the global scale. Like you can do this. And that's why it's so cool to think about what we're doing here is we're training systems designers and we're training people to think in systems, to think in bigger pictures while also thinking about all the nitty-gritty details at the same time. And that's just what the world needs. Like the world is in many ways on fire, and we need people that can do that kind of problem. And to your point about it being a journey and there's always more to learn, like I think that there's this other thing about kind of just in general is it's very subjective in many ways. It's like, is it good? Is it bad? Like I remember feeling early in my career, I was like, am I even good at this? Like, is what I did, like, I think it's better than what we had before. It definitely looks better than what we had before, but like, yeah, maybe we get like the needle moves on some numbers, but then the needle moves down on other numbers, or you don't even get the numbers at all. And this is something that like you can objectively get better at OOUX. Like, and you can feel yourself getting better at OOUX and feel yourself become more powerful. You're nodding your head. So that's cool.
Yeah, it is very, very subjective. And even like in the product that we've recently launched, like we apply the design, but in a way there is some sort of a personal taste applied to this, but how can you make sure that this is as objective as possible? And OOUX is one of the answers for that, I feel.
Yeah, like this baseline, certain things are going to be just good.
Exactly.
So going back to you talking about like after you had the certification and then you started the development and that made you a lot more and working with the developers, like tell us a little bit about how that went, how the development process went, and how your certification kind of played into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the development was done by, again, the same agency that did the discovery phase and the alpha phase. These two early on phases, we wanted to do them to identify, make some assumptions and test those assumptions. And OOUX was one of them. So I felt that the agency was ready to get on board with the actual development of what we previously tested, including the object-oriented approach or the object model that we were developing for infrastructure.gov.uk. So I felt that it was a lot easier for me as a client to start this journey again with them of implementation. If I had done that with another agency who was perhaps not necessarily experienced with object-oriented design, I think it would have been a lot more challenging, which is why OOUX was a key requirement within the contract specification. If the agencies didn't have that, then it would be difficult for them to actually help us achieve our vision to become object-oriented with the website that we were developing. So I think that was really important, and that made the journey and the onboarding with the agency a lot easier. We had
this was Manifesto, right?
Manifesto, yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
And so Kate was with, it still is, it's Manifesto. So shout out to
Yes.
Kate, shout out to Manifesto.
Yeah, I know.
And then they also came on for the development work. So,
yes.
But you still, like, as just to give context, like as a government agency, you still had to like put, I don't know if you call it an RFP, you still had to put that out there to open it up to other agencies potentially, but you still went with Manifesto again because for that continuity and because they had OOUX.
And mostly because they met the requirements. So there is a competitive exercise which is very fair, and when you look at the answers, they were just a better agency ready to make our vision ready for us. So it was very important for us to have that very object-oriented requirements within the contract specification. We did have some challenges, I must say, because how do you write Jira tickets? You know, when you really start the actual development and implementation of the website, not necessarily at the very start, but when you start thinking about, okay, so we're using Drupal now. We've migrated to Drupal. We were not really experienced with Drupal before, but now we are, which is brilliant. So Drupal calls it with content types. It's not necessarily objects. And how do you shape these content types? And there are certain rules with Drupal that means that you've got to adapt the object system or model that you have scoped and defined. So Kate was superb really at supporting us writing the acceptance criteria for the tickets based on the objects that we created. She gave us that process to write further tickets later on. So at the very start, Kate was absolutely essential to clarify what the process would be to make sure that an object specified in Notion can be translated into a Jira ticket, and how that Jira ticket would then be taken by a front-end, back-end developer and implemented and then user tested again. So that workflow was absolutely important to clarify at the very start of the development piece.
Yes, definitely. That, because so many things could get lost in translation there. So I'm very good.
Yes.
With those, like if you're writing a ticket for an object, like what do those actually sound like? Like, are you writing user stories, or are you like, make this object and here's all the attributes that this object needs to show, here's the order of the attributes? What do those tickets sound like?
Yes, so you have two different kind of tickets, one for the back end and one for the front end.
Okay.
So for the back end, the attributes that you're going to have there may actually be different and have a different behavior than the ones that an end user is going to see in the front end.
Okay.
So you need to specify that, what is the experience? And again, like this is back to the user roles with the objects themselves. As a user, as a content designer, for example, my role is going to be very different than a resident living in Renfrewshire.
Got it. So you're writing it back end, you mean like content creator back end?
Yes, sort of. Based on exactly. And based on the role, but also this has some information about how the sort of Drupal modules that we will need to use, for example, or how sort of conditional logic we will need to apply within the backend or within the front end. So there is a front end and a back end aspect associated with that. So you have the way we structured them, you have a description. So basic, what's the actual objective of that ticket? So that's got to be crystal clear. And then within that, you have also user acceptance criteria. So again, as a user, I want to do X, so I can do Y, but there's a bit more into this. So you really have to be detailed, and sometimes you have to detail every single attribute or metadata or even relationships and what that means for every single user that is experiencing it.
Did the developers look at an object map? Did you go over an object map with them at any time?
Yes, so that was one of the outputs that we put into tickets. So in terms of outputs or additional materials, we had simplified or very visual object maps within Figma that we sort of prototyped. And then we had the very detailed object maps within Notion.
Mm-hmm.
And within Notion, this is where we actually captured the nitty-gritty, every single attribute. So sometimes you have conditional logic, for example, and I loved using Notion and the conditional logic with that, because within Notion, you can actually reference other attributes and other objects. So it was very easy for me to actually specify how the conditional logic should work for the developer so they can really implement it in the way that is specified within that Notion template.
God. And 99%, I don't even know if I want to say this or not, but I would say so many designers are not thinking about conditional logic at all. They're not thinking about it. Maybe they are, or they're thinking about it, but they're thinking about it and they're trying to figure it out on the screens. So they're doing a bunch of different screen flows, and they're trying to do this and then that, and then like, let me create this massive Figma file, right, with all the different, all the different variations. And sometimes you need to do that. But if you figured out the conditional logic in something like an object map, and you're writing it out and you're referencing different pieces of the puzzle while you're in Notion, and that makes it a lot easier to design those screens, right? To be able to think about that stuff early.
Yes. But in between, you still need to have conversation with developers. So sometimes how I am writing may be not necessarily misunderstood, but the expertise and the context might be different for another backend developer. So that ongoing conversation is also very important, on top of course, having very robust specification with your user acceptance criteria.
And in the design where the developers were like, we can't do that. Like, did you get shut down at all, or in general, did the vision come to life pretty much how you wanted it to?
Pretty much how we wanted it how to, but sometimes you have to cut corners and working within a budget and within a time frame. And sometimes the perfection is not necessarily reachable with the resources that you've got. So there were some compromises made along the way, which is absolutely fine, and they were anticipated as well. But sometimes we struggled, for example, with the modularity of cards. Cards were tricky because we built an agnostic design system and pattern library. So the design system on Figma using atomic design principles, but making it a bit more object-oriented. So it becomes more of a full stack design system. And then you have Storybook and Chromatic for the actual pattern library, which sort of reflects what's in Figma. But the pattern library in Chromatic and Storybook is platform agnostic. So that means that if we want to build a mobile app at some point, well, we're still going to reuse that, but we may need to make some tweaks to make sure that it's adapted for the app environment technology. And with Drupal, most of the time when you do front-end development or theming, you have to adapt with an agnostic pattern library. So it was quite difficult there we had to make some changes with the front-end sometimes in terms of the coding itself and in terms of the terminology as well, or the naming convention. That made the testing a bit more difficult because sometimes we were not necessarily knowing what we were testing. So whether we were testing the pattern library, and when the pattern library was right within Storybook or Chromatic, we could not necessarily understand why it was not replicated on Drupal, because Drupal applies its own rules sometimes.
Okay.
So hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying, but it's like when you have multiple tools that are showing design components that are related to objects, and that these tools are managed by different people, this is where you may have some misalignment between the various products that you're actually managing.
What do you mean by an agnostic design system? Agnostic to a platform?
Yes. So for example, we could have developed a pattern library with Storybook and Chromatic specifically for Drupal, meaning that Drupal would really consume the pattern library and the changes would have been a lot easier for us. But we're thinking long term. If you're thinking long term, what if you want to use the pattern library for something else at some point, which may be a mobile app, which may be another website or a microsite, which may be various things. So there were pros and cons, and we chose the long-term option rather than just a very short-term one.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense, because sometimes I use the term generic design systems, meaning a design system that like doesn't have any OOUX in it, that doesn't have any semantics in it. Yeah. It's just like, here's a bunch of components and there's cards and you can put whatever you want in these cards, whatever. So did you, when you were making your agnostic design system, and now I've differentiated those in my mind, so thank you for that. With your design system, did you have like components that were specific to objects? Like how did you, when you say full stack design system, like I'm thinking of Emmett Conley over at Intercom. I don't know if he's still there.
Yes.
He wrote the article of full stack design systems and brought in some OO thinking to that. Is that what you're thinking? Like how did OUX thread into your design system?
Yes. So, of course, you're going to reuse the atomic design principles because, yes, as part of a website, you have components. And these are kind of objects anyway. They are objects of a website. But when you want to apply your own, let's say, domain model or system model for the thing that you're building, so for us, that was a website for local government, you have to reflect these objects from this system model, into your design system. When you look at, we have some sort of a folder or a group within our design system called cards. And within the cards, we actually show all of the different objects that we have in here. So for example, you have a card for a service and you're going to have conditional logic applied to them because there's different metadata. Sometimes the service can be open or closed. There is a primary topic always with a service. And yeah, there's an interesting conversation to have here around the difference between domain model or topic model and a system model or object model. So this is something that we struggled a bit with, but I think we found a good compromise there. What else did we have? Financial support, whether it's all year round or fixed round. So we have cards for those. We have consultation. We have place. We have event, publication, person as well. So a counselor, for example, or a senior officer working at the council, they've got to have a card. And within those cards as well, sometimes you have a miniature card and sometimes you have just a fill card. So yes, we apply the object orientedness with the cards mostly in the design system.
So no masking, no masked object.
No.
Oh, no. Okay, and some intentional shape-shifting there based on conditional logic that y'all did a lot of very, very good thinking on.
Yes.
And so it was all very intentional shape-shifting. Beautiful. That's so exciting. So now you launched part of it. Tell me about how'd the launch go? How's the site going?
So the launch was extremely smooth. We are working with two websites at the moment. We have the new and the old because we're still rewriting and migrating the content from the old to the new website. Having an object model or system model is extremely useful, but it takes time to adopt it across a team. We have to unlearn our processes of the past. And we come from the old website, which is not object-oriented. It's mostly about how the council teams are structured and how the teams are called, which does not make sense for a resident or like a member of the community within Renfrewshire. So we had to change that. But at the same time, because people, let's face it, people are, they have built a certain familiarity with bad local government websites. So the challenge for me in a way was, how do you sort of like keep that familiarity, because now they sort of understand the context that they're working in, introducing objects that they are understanding because of their mental model.
So I had a conversation that makes sense. And I had a conversation recently on the podcast with Karen Huell, which I need to get you in touch with Karen because she's working on government websites here from a content strategy, OOUX perspective. Yeah. Y'all need to nerd out together. And she was mentioning how, like, yes, there is like, you are working with people who are working in government. I don't know how it is in Scotland, but here in the US, government workers are very busy and doing like 500 different things while also keeping a site up to date and trying to keep a site up to date. So like the whole content creation flow is something that's in the past has been fraught with things like duplicated content or content that is no longer relevant anymore, outdated content, or like if you do need to change it, you need to change it in like 6 different places or something like that. Like, how is it going with your content creators now? Are they adjusting to this new way? Are they finding a better user experience when it comes to content creation and actually their job of like making sure those sites information is correct?
I would say so. For me, there are 2 main improvements here. First of all, the content management system itself. There, we're moving from a very old system to a new one, which is object-oriented. So already it makes sense for content creators or content designers to actually use the system itself, because it is built for the objects or the content types that they are working with every day. So that's the first part.
What a concept.
The second part is...
That would be easier.
I know. The second part, it flows. This is what's important, is that although it's more difficult for them because they don't necessarily have to think about the structure anymore, but they have to think about what they are going to put in this structure. So I think we have freed up their time. Like, instead of looking at the structure, they can really optimize the content itself and maximize the structure with clear content. Because in government websites and many other websites, in a way, your content must be clear for your users. Findable and usable. That's the key. So the OUX part, so the object and how they've been structured, they don't need to do that anymore. If, let's say, they are working with a grant or a benefit, they are going to use the financial support content type or object, which has been structured already. So they just need to look at the sort of template and see how that template would work with the content that they have. And nine times out of 10, I would say, you don't really have to change the structure at all. You don't have to make some amendments. Sometimes, unfortunately, government financial supports or services, because of how the government policies have been built, they're not necessarily object-oriented in the first place.
No.
So sometimes it can be a bit challenging, but most of the time, we just reuse the content types or objects that we have created or that we have on Drupal, and they're able to effectively focus on the quality of content and do the migration.
They go and they create a new event. If they want to create a new event, create new page or create new sub page.
Yes.
And then let me figure out how to turn this into an event in some weird way.
Yes, and when you have content editors, creators, designer, they all have a different way of working if you don't necessarily have a structural process. So then perhaps within the event, which was the case in our previous website, well, you see, let's say, the timeline or the dates of the event at the bottom of the page or not at the beginning of the page. So there was no consistency whatsoever. Now there is consistency. The objects are prototyped. The content management system is very clear and is putting the most important information at the very top always. So it's a lot easier for people. It's more demanding because now they need to fill these fields, but it's more rewarding, and also it's better for our users at the end of the day, which is the goal.
Totally. Amazing. So do you feel like this launch, and I know like a lot of times you don't have a lot of time to even celebrate or look back on it. And I want to take the time to just like give you a moment to celebrate. It sounds amazing. And like you did the thing and you got this launch out, and I'm sure it's like, now to the next thing. Now there's more work to be done. I mean, do you have a sense of pride on what you created with the team? Do people feel proud of what was launched?
Yes, I think it's going to take me time to realize, because as you said earlier, if people working in government, they wear multiple hats, they have multiple jobs, and this is how I feel at the moment. The website is now finished for me, so I want to do a lot more. For example, bin collection calendars, this is coming soon.
Yes, the bin collection. That was your first experiment, right? Was the recycle bins.
Yes, and it's now launched because we're also changing our waste routing management system at the same time. So that means different types of integrations and blah, blah, blah. So basically, it's an ongoing journey when you work in government, I feel. But yeah, it's funny, with my team, we had a call. So we launched on a Wednesday and we had a call on a Friday or Thursday, I can't remember. And it was actually nice to have just a call just to celebrate between maybe the 7 or 8 of us. So we're now a very big team. And yeah, it was just nice to reflect on how smooth and how the launch went and how organized we were, but also sort of like not knowing what to expect in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
So what sort of feedback were we going to get? And the feedback has been, overall, it's been quite positive, I would say. Internally from people, what a change. Like now, for example, we are, I would say, 95% compliant with the accessibility regulations, and we're going to reach 100% very soon. So there is a ranking in the UK with a very famous tool, accessibility testing tool. and we were like maybe ranked 350 in the local government space in the UK for accessibility. Well, now we are about 80 or 80, 85, I can't remember, so it's a big jump.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge.
Yes, exactly. And there's so much more that we're going to do to actually, the ranking in itself is not really important. Is the accessibility of the website is the most important, but it's just a reflection of actually we're doing really, really good things here for our users. And maybe we're showing a path to other councils or other organizations on how to do something a bit differently that would work better for the users. So I've had a lot of conversations with people in central government, for example, and that has been highlighting just to see the different sort of challenges that they are experiencing and maybe share a bit of my experience. Now, the challenges that I have experienced in local government would be very different from the ones that people experience in central government, because in central government, there is a lot more like of an approval process. In my local government is much smaller, so you don't really have that. But it's just good to kind of like show off a bit and say, well, look, like I don't work in central government, but I've been with my team, we've been able to do this, which is an amazing result. So yeah, I think it's going to be taken as a good example for many others in the industry, which is like where the pride is, I guess.
Amazing. You're very humble, and I really just want to kind of highlight that it's easy to focus on the gap of like all the stuff I want to do, and we haven't done this yet, we haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
But the gain is amazing, and the fact that you had a smooth launch is really something to celebrate, and that the feedback that's coming in is really positive so far. So
thank you.
Can we take a little trip down memory lane, and like how did this, especially thinking about fundamentally flowing OOUX through the entire process, how does this compare to previous projects that you've worked on?
Oh, I've got yes. So previously I worked on a very big university website, loads of content for multiple agencies or personas or users. And the CMS was not a choice that we could make, so it was forced. We had not necessarily had enough time to actually think about the structure of the website, so we really relied on an agency to do this for us. And sometimes when these things happen, when actually your core internal team is not fully involved in the shaping of the product, I think that you're going to have problems in the future. Because these agencies, they are amazing at the sort of expertise and support that they are providing, but sometimes they can lack context that you get on a day-to-day basis. So the website that was built for us, in a way, it was very heavy on those CMS components rather than the actual things that we needed for a university website. The only thing that we the two things that we structured more or less, but not necessarily the OOUX way, but structured a bit, it was courses, and then academics, and that was it. But there's so much more than that in a university landscape, so much more than that. You've got papers, you've got different kind of courses, you've got, within the universities, you have faculties as well, specialties like research groups. So there are a lot more objects within the university landscape, and we didn't do this. Going through the process of looking at the landscape of your objects or your environment first, for a local government website in this case, made me realize all of the things that I perhaps didn't do or didn't look at previously in the other projects I worked on. And that realization is kind of painful, but also kind of wonderful, because it just shows that humans are, you're growing as an individual.
Yeah.
And then you're learning new things. And it's the same with you. Like when you started the OOUX methodology or process, like I'm sure it's very, very different than what it is currently now.
Oh, it's evolved so much.
Yes. So exactly. So in a way, you shouldn't really feel too bad about the projects that you've worked on before that are not necessarily.
Right. And I mean, that's just to the point of like, it's a little tough love. But if you look back onto what you were doing 2 years ago or something, and you're not like, you don't feel a little cringy about it, that just means that you plateaued. That just means that you haven't grown, right? You kind of want to look back and be like, oh, like I would do that so differently today. I recently dug up a sketch that I did in I think it was about 2010 or something, for a very early freelance client, way before OOUX. And I started OOUXing it. I started noun foraging my sketch. from 2010.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I am sketching out the most unrealistic thing. Like I know that sketch did not get built. Like we had to build something else, but I had to show them that. And I, probably built it into I probably spent 10 hours making it client ready. And they were probably like, well, we can't do that because of this. We can't do this because of that. And then I just thought that was the process. Oh, just show them a picture. Wouldn't this be cool? And then they poke all the holes in it. And then I go back and I change all the things. And then I make it a little bit different instead of what you said. I love how you said that, getting the team together, a core team, shaping it together. Because I was not shaping with my clients. I was listening to them, taking a bunch of information and then just making some screens. And then it was just a really painful process instead of this co-shaping together with your team can actually be really fun and really fulfilling when you start clicking the puzzle pieces together.
And when you start with the screens or the prototypes, you don't necessarily think about the content that you're actually going to put in those screens and prototypes.
No.
And so, but it's very difficult, I feel, to sell this kind of idea of starting with the domain, which is a bit more abstract in a way, than actually starting with the prototypes. Because the prototypes are visuals. When you show them to stakeholders, especially leadership teams, for example, okay, they see something, it's visual, and they are going to appreciate that there is a product and that there is potential vision associated with that. But actually, this is not the most important part. This comes almost at the end.
Yeah.
The first part is the foundation of your content and how your content is going to be structured. And that is going to inform the prototypes. And these prototypes, actually, they are going to be even better than probably the ones that you've created in the first place without the content foundation. And it'll click for people when they'll see it. I'll be like, oh my God, it makes so much sense to see it this way. So for example, with us, we have a consultation hub now on renfrew.gov.uk. And when people see that, we never had a consultation hub where you list all of the consultations. They were spread across the website and they were not necessarily structured. But now they see it. They're like, oh my God, yeah, this is so much clearer to have this. I know when it starts, when it ends, what it's for, who it's for, and how I can actually submit my feedback and what's going to happen after I submit my feedback. And after I submit my feedback and the consultation is closed, so here we're thinking about conditional logic. Mm-hmm. I'm going to show the outcome of that consultation.
Nice.
And then you have the outcome, but then maybe within a consultation, there may be multiple phases of a consultation. You have phase 1 and then phase 2. Perhaps it happens every year. So perhaps you need to show the outcome of the consultation running in 2024 and then the consultation running in 2025 and so forth and so on. So this kind of structure, then people sit and oh yeah, it makes so much sense. And also now we're being transparent about what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it makes sense to them also, not because it makes sense because it makes sense, but it makes sense to them also because if they were together with you in the shaping, you were co-creating, co-shaping, and you teach them a new visual tool, which OOUX helps you do. It doesn't take that long to teach people how to read an object map. So they have a different visual. It's not screens. And we made this bet. I mean, over the last couple of decades, we've just trained everybody to expect screens to be this is what we're going to do. And then they get to be a star. And you're like, it doesn't matter whether it's a heart or a star right now. This is just a concept. But people get fixated on that. And there's just so many problems with that. But yeah, when you have that team coming together for the shaping, then when they see the prototype, they see the wireframes, they're like, yeah, okay, that's what we talked about. That's we were together looking at this object map and now it's translated into screens. It made sense over there and now it makes sense here too. And I like to say that when I started doing this, my reviews went from volatile, right? Coming home crying a lot because I totally missed the mark on something and my really wild design, it didn't make any sense, or, or I did exactly what they told me to do, but I didn't ask all the questions. And so then I would come home crying. And now it's just oh, when I show a prototype, it's just yeah, that's cool. That's what we talked about. There'd be little tweaks here and there, but it's nothing, no big deal. That's why I was asking you all, you're nodding your head, but I was asking you about how the transition into what the developers were doing. And it does sound like there was a little bit of that, oh, we've got to cut corners here. We've got to make a compromise here. But what I'm getting from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm getting from you is it didn't feel like you made this design that you were all excited about and you're this is going to be awesome. And then you give it to the developers and they just butcher it. And it just comes out and you're like, what is it? There's a little bit of a thread of what I designed, but it's not what I was intending at all.
Exactly. Very small inconsistencies which can be seen with the eye of a UX designer,
yes.
But for a normal user, probably not.
Yeah.
So, and this is where I think my team, and especially me, are not always aiming for perfection throughout the process. So that has been a really good exercise, I think, to have that in mind. What I want to achieve the most here is to launch a product that is good enough for people and that eventually we're going to optimize and improve. It's a long-term game. It's not like because we've launched a website just now, it doesn't mean that the game is finished. It's just starting. So yeah, it's been very interesting, but overall they didn't butcher it, as you said. They just followed what was there within the tickets in Jira, whether it was for front end or for back end or for the cards themselves, and they are more or less there at the moment and they are working. So in a way, in terms of fidelity, I think we would be at about 85-90% there. Mm-hmm. Some of the things have not been implemented because either we didn't have the time or the resources, or we didn't think that it was a priority, or maybe because we decided to code it in a specific way and not another way. But these things can be rectified.
That's amazing. And I think so many people listening are like, that sounds wonderful. I feel like everything I do just gets scrapped, or either it's a stakeholder or a subject matter expert or a, PO or something comes in and it's like, actually, I'd rather it be this. And they start moving all the pieces around, and then you don't actually, because it wasn't collaborative to begin with. And then you actually also a lot of UX designers don't have really good defenses of their design too. So they're like trying to defend a design that they know is better, but they can't really articulate why it's better. And then it just kind of gets torn apart. And that can be so demoralizing, right? If that's just happening over and over and over again, and you're just seeing small threads of your design make it to production. So the 85 to 90% is stellar. Like that again, like I'm so happy for y'all. And I'm curious to know, to wrap it up, like talk to me a little bit about like the prioritization process and what's next and how you see you're going to be like building on this. Are you going to continue to use OOUX, and how might that help you build out a roadmap, if so?
We kind of have a roadmap already. Yes, there are many more things I want to do. So first of all, optimizing renforser.gov.uk. We have a lot more objects that we need to develop. I talked about the bin collection, for example. This is prototyped, this is done, but we just need to implement it and do the technical integration, which is a bit complicated. But then we have other objects. So events and places are going to be two new objects that are going to be released within the content management system in the next few weeks, which is brilliant. I want to add more objects. So we're going to have one, for example, for training or training courses. Sometimes we provide training to people. We're going to have a training object at some point. For training, it's for end users or residents who want to upskill so that they can get a job. So we have to model that as a training because this is good. And the training object is also going to be reused for the intranet because I want to model an intranet. And training is going to be used for staff members who want to actually skill again and develop their expertise or acquire new expertise. So on top of optimizing renforser.gov.uk, we are going to model an intranet, which is what I want. Which is the project I want to do in the advanced program.
And that's going to be your advanced project.
I think so, yes.
Okay,
because we're going to start the development of an intranet in the new year. So in 2026.
Very cool. So what were you going to say? There was something else?
Yes. I mean, there are many things to say, but basically is how can you reuse? And this is where I guess it gets interesting sometimes. How can you reuse different objects used in different products in different ways? Because sometimes these objects, they are kind of modular, they are kind of flexible. Yes, they made it a little bit of like personalization based on where they land in terms of the product that they are in, but they can be reused.
Yeah. And it comes down to that like intentional shape shifting and conditional logic or designing for different rules. It's the same training object, but like it still feels like a training object and you can reuse so much of it. But then like when it's in an intranet, like maybe there's a little bit more information or like there's actually a sign up, I don't know, call to action. So OOUX will help you do that. But what like the thing that like stood out to me, what you were saying when I was asking you about the roadmap is you're talking about introducing new objects. You're not talking about introducing a new section. You're not talking about introducing a new feature. You're thinking about the rollout objects, which I feel personally, that might be a little bit biased, that is how you create a system that doesn't collapse under its own complexity, a system that is robust and strong. And it's like, okay, I have these foundational objects. You've got like your services and your consultations and like the big chunky objects are in. And now it's like, ooh, now we get to play and add the training object. And I'm guessing when you're looking at your training object, are you thinking about like, now, how does that connect? Like, does it actually connect to any of your existing objects, and you'll kind of do a little bit of a nested object type thing?
Even connect with an event, for example. A training may have multiple dates, so would that be an event potentially? Don't know. I've not identified it. So these are the sort of questions that we will have to ask ourselves. Maybe a training is related to process. So, for example, I want to raise a purchase order. There may be a training for the purchase order to be raised, but perhaps there is guidance or process associated with it, because most users, I mean, as an employee, sometimes I don't necessarily want to do the training to actually do the thing I want to do. I actually want to access the information that I need so I can do it right away. So this is where I feel there would be a lot of relationships and connections between sort of like very similar pieces of content, but actually they are kind of different because they are different objects.
Yeah.
One would be a step-by-step process, and the other one would be, well, this is just a video or a training event where we will actually show you how to do the thing.
Sounds like a job for OOUX.
Yes, exactly.
I'm like, that sounds really fun. Let's go model it right now. Yes. But I'm going to let you go. But I'll leave you with a thought that is potentially some of your trainings might contain multiple events. If you have like a reoccurring thing, like this training happens like every Monday at 5 p.m., then those become your events of Monday, but the training is like the bigger thing with the events inside. But
yes,
that might be a type of training that has many events.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for walking us through all of this. Just congratulations again on launching, and I'm excited to hear about what the next release is going to be like. And it just sounds like, yeah, you're building something amazing over there and spreading the word. And I just thank you so much for being a part of this community and coming on the show.
Well, I received so much. So yeah, no, it's thank you to you and to the community really for creating this and for really supporting that community throughout. I think that's super important to have that. It feels most of the time like therapy. You know, we're like a bunch of people who are actually caring about what we're doing, but sometimes we're kind of struggling with the process to achieve that, but that gives you the confidence and the reassurance that you're actually following something that is going to work in the end. So, you know, without OOUX, I don't think I would have been able to create a website of this quality with my team. So yeah, thank you for that.
And yes, that's okay. And I'll just leave with this community, these big-hearted OOUXers out there that come in, want to change the world and want to change the world in big ways and are not satisfied with just skating along the surface and moving the deck chairs around. Like we want to get into it. We want to get into the structure. We want to get into the strategy and really think about these pieces that are going to sustain for a long time instead of just moving on the surface. And honestly, like, I feel like we're like a transition team. Like, we're up against an industry that does not work like this. And that is burning people out like crazy. Like, I'm just seeing this stuff on LinkedIn of people just being so disillusioned with UX. They're not enjoying it. And it makes sense because they're so frustrated. They're just banging their heads against the wall. And, you know, so that's why it can feel like a little bit like a therapy session. Like, we're trying to do things different and within, you know, sometimes more difficult context, but it is a way that we can make bigger change. We can make more future-proof change. The structuring work that you're doing is probably going to be, who knows? But I mean, a decade, right? Like it's going to, because it's based on things that don't change quickly, right? The objects, were the same 50 years ago. So it's going to sustain. It's going to be there for a while. It's not going to just get scrapped in a few years.
Government is very slow to change. So don't think it will change anytime soon.
Yeah, most domains are. The objects change slow. So anyway, thank you again for being here, and thank you everybody for listening. Happy OOUXing, and I hope to see some of you in cohort 11, or maybe I'm getting to know you in cohort 11. And otherwise, go to OOUX.com to learn more about OOUX. Cheers, y'all.
Thank you so much for listening to the UX Level Up podcast. If you want to connect with me, Sophia, please follow me on Instagram at SophiaVUX, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophia Prater. I'm pretty easy to find there. Our music was brought to you by Ruby Vel, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Thanks again for listening.